There's a clip of former President George W. Bush that has gone viral, and once you see it, you'll understand why.
The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, too. Anyway, 75. Here's the
Yeah, 75. Age isn't too kind. You know what I'm saying? Oh, here we go. Well, look, hey, that was fantastic because the guy just admitted it. That's just not a faux pas. I don't think that's just because he's old. I do think that it's on his mind. Come on. No, he knows. Look, the guy, how could he not know that he got 1 million Iraqis killed in his bullshit, unjustified, brutal invasion of Iraq? And now look, and it's not just the Iraqi death toll, by the way. You had coalition troops that were killed in the war, the insurgency. You have survivors that are suffering now still from PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, illnesses related to depleted uranium rounds. All of that is on George W. Bush. That's the guy. As one of you points out, that's Grandpa war crime. Absolutely. Absolutely. This man is a war criminal. He has blood on his hands. Doesn't matter how many pretty pictures he goes and paints. He's a war criminal. He got people killed. Lots and lots of people killed. And by the way, this guy is now walking around and giving speeches apparently about how bad Putin is. And I'm not saying Putin's good, right? I'm just saying what that is the pot calling the kettle black. Now, while I was doing research on this story, I actually went back and I've got a video to show you of Senator Bernie Sanders back in 2002 making an exact argument of, hey, if we do the invasion of Iraq, and I'll show you the full video here, if we do that invasion, this unjustified attack, well, I mean, that's going to make it real difficult for us to criticize other countries when they do the same thing. And oh, look, Russia did the same thing to Ukraine. Weird. Now, of course, the reaction to was the crowd. They laughed. Why? Why did they laugh? That's not something that's funny. I mean, except for the irony of oh, he admitted it. That's not funny. Millions of people died. And the reason they laugh is because, I mean, okay. There's a couple reasons. For number one, he's been rehabilitated by the libs, okay, by the liberal press, by the establishment. Secondly, anybody who's going to watch George W. Bush give a speech is already very likely a neocon. So those are the only people that, or liberal in this case, those are the only people that are going to watch George W. Bush. So, and by the way, if you're a neocon ghoul, you probably still believe that the invasion was totally fine. Either that or you have the amnesia over one of the biggest foreign policy debacles of my lifetime. It's absolutely disgusting on so many different levels here. The laundering of this monstrous image, I think it's one of the biggest indictments of the establishment. Just because we had Donald Trump, who, again, monstrous, right? Doesn't absolve George W. Bush of his crimes. But yet, you have Ellen DeGeneres that loves him. A good friend George W. Bush. Michelle Obama. Joe Biden. They love him. And by the way, Joe Biden, going back to him, he did vote for that disastrous war. There's also blood on his hands. The only people that voted against this, that really stood up against this, were people like Barbara Lee. I think she was only House member to vote against this. And of course, you have Bernie Sanders, which I'm going to show you his 5 different reasons that he gave at during his speech on the floor of Congress back in 2002 while they were discussing this, an invasion.
Mr. Speaker, in the brief time I have, let me give you 5 reasons why I'm opposed to giving the president a blank check to launch a unilateral invasion and occupation of Iraq, and why I will vote against this resolution. 1, I have not heard any estimates of how many young American men and women might die in such a war, or how many tens of thousands of women and children in Iraq might also be killed. 2nd, I am deeply concerned about the precedent that a unilateral invasion of Iraq could establish in terms of international law and the role of the United Nations. If President Bush believes that the U.S. can go to war at any time against any nation, what moral or legal obligation could our government raise if another country chose to do the same thing? 3rd, the United States is now involved in a very difficult war against international terrorism, as we learned tragically on September 11th. 4th, at a time when this country has a $6 trillion national debt and a growing deficit, we should be clear that a war and a long-term American occupation of Iraq could be extremely expensive. 5th, I am concerned about the problems of so-called unintended consequences. Who will govern Iraq when Saddam Hussein is removed? And what role will the U.S. play in an ensuing civil war that could develop in that country? Will moderate governments in the region who have large Islamic fundamentalist populations be overthrown and replaced by extremists? Will the bloody conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Authority be exacerbated? And these are just a few of the questions that remain unanswered.
Oh, look, and it turns out those questions ended up being incredibly poignant. It's almost like all the bad decisions this country has been making over the past few decades, Bernie Sanders was out there saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe we shouldn't do that. This sounds like it could be a bad idea. And what happened? Well, we did it anyway. Of course. And so, yeah. Now, that said, this video went viral. Not the one about Bernie Sanders, although it should, but the one about George W. Bush. And it actually went around on Arabic media as well. And so you had some Iraqi journalists that weighed in. In fact, here's Iraqi journalist Omar El-Janabi, who tweeted this: "The specter of Iraq's invasion and destruction haunts Bush Jr. His subconscious exposed it when it took over his tongue. Yes, it is a brutal and unjustified invasion, which will remain your worst nightmare." Damn. Another journalist, Nahid Al-Tamimi, says this: "The crime of your occupation of Iraq and its destruction will remain a nightmare that haunts your sleep and torments your dead criminal consciences." Oof. Mincing no words. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think I can add much more to this than that. I think they summed it up pretty well. Again, the war in Iraq is, it is a colossal injustice that has absolutely no remedy at this point. You can't undo the war, you can't undo the invasion, you can't undo the years of occupation and civil war, you can't bring back the dead. But and as long as as long as the United States continues to allow this monster to walk free, that wound created by him and Dick Cheney and the rest of the ghouls that, put us on this path to the war, and the intelligence agencies that lied about weapons of mass destruction, and the corporations like Halliburton that benefited greatly from Iraq's destruction. As long as we allow those people and organizations to run free and to not be punished, that wound that was created will continue to fester and will never heal.